You're listening to Mr. Credit on San Diego 1700 with local credit expert Derek Evans. Now, live in studio, Mr. Credit.
Welcome to Mr. Credit. We are live and local here in San Diego, bringing you the most important hour in radio and telling you everything they don't want you to know about consumer credit scoring. The bureaus, the banks, the government, they're all in it together. And today, bankruptcy. And they don't want you to know a lot about bankruptcy because in bankruptcy, who wins? You win. Who loses? The banks lose. And we're going to talk about that in detail momentarily. Padres still in first place after beating the Cardinals last night, 1-0 in a pitcher's duel. Really good game, actually. Got very exciting at the end. Our lead on L.A. is now 2 full games. We're taking on the Cardinals again tonight at home right here in San Diego, downtown Petco Park, 7 p.m. You can listen to all of the Padres games right here on San Diego 1700. So save this station in your dial. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 13 bankruptcy, some of the myths about that. We're going to answer your emails. I have some bankruptcy emails I've been saving up. We're also going to be talking about how bankruptcy can actually help your credit. Is that possible? Yes, it is. And in most cases, that's how it works. We've got a few stories in the news, but I want to welcome our guest. We have the William McDonald in the studio today. William, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks for having me on.
It's always a pleasure, my man. I love talking with people and working with people who care about the consumer. That is what I'm all about, and that's what you're all about as well. And, you know, the first story I want to talk about here isn't related to bankruptcy, but I want you to weigh in on it, too. This one came from TransUnion. The story says, TransUnion reports decline in national delinquency rates in Q1. Remember, we got the report that we read yesterday and one from last week that was from Experian. And they were saying that people are paying their mortgages and paying their auto loans and not paying their credit cards. And that was how the story read. Listen to this one.
That's good advice.
And for most people, it sure is. Credit and information management firm TransUnion Tuesday reported that national delinquency rates for auto loans, mortgage loans, and credit cards declined. So they're saying that it declined across the board. Now, for the first quarter of 2010 compared with the fourth quarter of 2009. So on a year-over-year basis, delinquency rates were lower for auto loans and credit cards while it remained higher for mortgage loans. So when we talk about the bureaus not having their heads screwed on straight or not communicating with one another or being all over the map, look at this. We have two of the major reporting agencies, Experian and TransUnion, Experian being probably the biggest, and TransUnion, you know, of course, having their chairperson sitting on Obama's Economic Advisory Board. They are saying that people actually were paying their auto loans and their credit cards but not paying their mortgages. So we've got conflicting information here. But I think the theme is the same. The theme is that they want to try to encourage your behavior based on the message that they're giving. And in this case, you can see how the message changed from week to week. Maybe they realized when they came out with the first story that actually is kind of encouraging people to not pay their credit cards. Well, you know, that's not what butters the bread of these banks. I mean, the $18 billion of profit that they got the first quarter of this year, the American banks anyway, that comes mostly from credit card stuff. That's where all the big interest rates are, and that's where the big profit margins are. Even though, you know, something like Chapter 7 bankruptcy has existed for years and years and years and years and years and has been factored into this equation forever, they still make an absolute mountain of profit from these credit cards. And that's why they're so evil. But in the end, they're a necessary evil for your credit score. Remember, if you don't have a credit card, you're missing out on 30% of your credit score. So the first story I wanted to go over with you, William, was something I read online this week. I was talking about cram down bankruptcy laws and how those work. So I'm going to read the story here, or at least the first paragraph, and then you can comment on it. New bankruptcy laws may soon go into effect to relieve San Diego County's underwater real estate market, wherein mortgages may be modified or crammed down by bankruptcy judges. So in the first week of March 2009, House Representatives passed this long overdue bankruptcy cram-down bill by an outstanding vote. Explain to us what that is, and is that something that's working or happening right now?
The cram down is where you're basically taking whatever the mortgage is. Right now, first of all, you can't do it in bankruptcy.
You can't?
It's the bill is pending. We actually had the same bill last summer, and it made it through the House, but it didn't make it through the Senate. And what Congress, I think what they're trying to do with this bill is to force these lenders to start working with borrowers, because the loan modification is pretty much, the loan modification programs have been an absolute disaster. Yeah. So there really is no leverage for the borrower out there to force the lenders to work with them. So right now it's all discretionary whether lenders want to work with you or not. In a bill like this, somebody could file for Chapter 13 and go before the judge and explain their circumstances, and then maybe actually force them to modify the loans, which they don't have the power to do right now. In Chapter 13, currently we can do a cram down with cars. So in other words, if your car is worth $10,000, you owe $15,000. $5,000 when you file Chapter 13, you can cram it down to the fair market value, so long as the loan is more than 910 days old. So that was one of the major changes with the bankruptcy laws in 2005. Before it used to be you could go get a loan 3 weeks ago and then cram it down as soon as you file, but they changed the bankruptcy laws in 2005, so now the loan has to be a bit, usually just about 2 years old.
Okay.
So, and then you can cram down the loan to the fair market value, which is a huge advantage. So typically, they're going to bifurcate that claim from a secured claim into also an unsecured claim. So $10,000 would be secured in the example I gave, and $5,000 would be unsecured. The unsecureds typically in a Chapter 13 are going to get paid pennies on the dollar, where the secured creditors are going to get paid 100%.
Okay.
So the cram down is a powerful tool, and it's very interesting that you bring that up, because I think that's probably what a lot of the consumers need out there to force these banks to work with them.
I like that. It's leverage through the law, and that's leveraging the law is really important, and that's really what bankruptcy is, in my opinion. It's using the law that's set forth for you. It's one of the only laws that really exists that's super pro-consumer. I mean, this is designed. This is your bailout. This is your opportunity to take the law and use it to your advantage from a financial perspective, from an emotional perspective, from a personal perspective, and actually use the law to your advantage monetarily. So, I like the idea of them actually putting a law in place that somewhat, creates action opposite maybe of what that law is. So in other words, if this went through, what it would mean is that in bankruptcy, someone would be able to cram down the balance that they owe on the mortgage. I mean, the amount that they would have to eventually pay back in order to keep the home. If it were a $500,000 home that was worth $300,000 now, they would get to essentially relieve that $200,000 or make it unsecured and pay pennies on the dollar back through the 13.
That's correct. So right now what we're able to do in a Chapter 13 is we can do a lien strip, but that's only on second mortgages, home equity lines. If there's no equity for that, in other words, if you owe more money on the first mortgage than the property is worth, then you can get rid of that second mortgage. But there's, as I always tell my clients, if you can't afford the regular ongoing payments on the first mortgage, there's no sense in doing a Chapter 13 because you're going to set yourself up for failure. And what this bill that you're discussing would allow us as bankruptcy attorneys to go before a judge and actually modify that first mortgage to make it affordable, so then you can make your regular ongoing first mortgage and probably do the lien strip if you have a second mortgage as well. So it would make Chapter 13 even more powerful. And
that's beautiful. And I want to focus on something that William just brought up, and the reason why I recommend him solely to you as the best bankruptcy attorney in town. What did he just say? He just said that if you can't afford the payments on your first mortgage, there's no sense in trying to do a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So his advice is not to do bankruptcy in that circumstance. And that's when I tell you that you give him a call, he'll sit down with you and see if it makes sense. That's what I'm talking about. If it doesn't make sense for you, if there's no way for it to ultimately benefit you in the long run, he's not going to sign you up. He's not a mill. He's not a bankruptcy mill, like Lisa said last week. He's not a bankruptcy mill. He's actually trying to give you advice and actually cares about you. Do yourself this favor. If you're in a situation where you need to be considering these things, you're having some financial trouble, find out what your options are. Find out what's available to you. This is the law. It was written for you. You need to level the playing field. Yeah. That's the only way you can level the playing field is through bankruptcy. That's your only tool. That's the only tool that we're given as citizens that we all have access to, and it's our legal right. Become educated about it. Find out what is going to be best for you and your family. Give William a call. Give his office a call and set up a time to come and meet with him. 858-437-0103. 858-437-0103. You can sit down with William and he'll explain this stuff with your specific information in mind so that you can decide what's going to be best for you and what isn't. So I love this idea because I really think that the big problem with the credit bureaus right now is that there isn't a big enough penalty, by law. And the Fair Credit Reporting Act is a beautiful piece of legislation. I love it. It's great. In theory, it's fantastic. But the problem is the enforcement of it. And that's kind of what the issue is. So what this type of legislation would create is somewhat of it's not a bluff anymore. We actually have a good hand here. We're playing good cards. So we can go and get these loans modified, keep people in their homes, or potentially, if you do have to file for bankruptcy, get a situation where you can afford it and ultimately stay in your home, keep your home,